What is up, guys? All right, so today before we begin our notes, I thought we would warm up with this problem right here. Okay, you're going to solve for x, all right? But we're going to be using the method we just learned where you're going to be taking square roots on both sides, okay? So, solve for the x squared, right? Move the 280 over, divide by 10, take your square roots, okay? And I'll see you in a couple minutes. Okay, here we go. I'm going to add 280. Add 280. And I get 10x squared equals 4,480. All right. Then I'm going to divide everything by 10. Divide everything by 10. And I get x squared equals 448. Okay. Then I take the square root on both sides. Take the square root. Don't forget, every time you take the square root on both sides, you need to put a plus or minus right here because we're going to have two answers. All right. And so the square root of x squared is x. So x equals plus or minus the square root. Okay. And now we got to figure out 448. Okay. So let's divide by our numbers. We'll go backwards, right? So let me turn it on. 448 divided by, what was it, 144? Okay, let's see. Nope, that's a decimal. So 448 divided by 121. Nope, that's a decimal. 448 divided by 100. Nope, that's a decimal. 448 divided by 81. Nope, that doesn't work. 448 divided by 64. Boom, there it is. 64 times 7. So that is what I'm going to write right here. I get the 64 and the 7, so put a 64 times 7. And so break it up. X equals plus or minus square root of 64 times square root of 7. X equals plus or minus the square root of 64. You should know that. It's 8 times the square root of 7, just stays like that. All right, hopefully that's what you got. Today we are going to be solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Okay, this is another technique you're going to need to know. So far, you have solved quadratic equations by using by factoring. Okay, then you solve quadratic equations by taking square roots. Okay, then we're going to learn how to solve quadratic equations by completing the square. And then after that, we're going to, maybe it's new, maybe you've seen it before, we're going to solve quadratic equations by using the quadratic formula. And we'll get to sing a song. It's going to be really, really fun. And by fun, I mean torture. All right, so here we go. Let's do an example. Here is my first example. I have x squared plus 10x minus 9 equals 30. Okay? Now before I begin, I want to just show you why this problem is different than this problem. Why are we going to use a different technique here than we did here? Can you guys see a difference between these two problems? Okay? All right, so take a look. This problem has an A term and it has two C terms. It doesn't have a B term, does it? So anytime you're missing the B term, you can do this. You can use this technique, okay? All right. Not always. Most of the time. There are some exceptions, okay? Here we have an A term, a B term, and a C term, and another C term, okay? So if you notice this, we have all the terms, A, B, and C, okay? So here's what you're going to look for. When you are deciding whether or not you want to complete the square, you're going to look to see if the A term is 1, okay? So we're going to use this technique if A equals 1, okay? A is 1, it's 1x squared, and B is 10, that is an even number. And so if A is 1 and B is even, okay? If B is an even number, okay? These two things. We're going to use the technique of completing the square if A is 1 and B is even, okay? And this is how you do it. Here we go. we're going to move the 9 over to the other side. Move 9 over. Oops, add 9. And we get this, x squared plus 10x. You're going to leave some space right here. Okay, where the 9's canceled, we're going to leave some space. Equals, and then 30 plus 9 is 39. Okay? All right, so all we did was add 9 to the other side. Okay? And this is what you're going to do now. Okay? Now, cut b in half, then square the result. Okay, we're going to cut b in half and square the result. So again, what's b? b is 10. Okay, so b is 10, so we're going to cut 10 in half. That's 5. And then square the result. So that means square the 5. So 5 squared is 25. Okay? Then put that number in the blank. That's the blank right there. Okay? Fill in the blank, right? Fill in the blank. All right, so here we go. We now get x squared plus 10x. All right, cut the 10 in half, that's 5. Square the 5, we get 25. So we add 25 plus 25. Okay, we got a positive 25. When we cut the b in half, we cut the 10 in half, we got 5. Then we squared it, we got 25. So I just put a plus 25 here. Okay, so equals 39. And remember, if I add a 25 here, I also have to add a 25 here. So plus 25 here. Keeping up so far? All right, here we go. Now, here's what we do. This guy right here is now a perfect square trinomial. This guy, now that I've added the 25 there, I have now just completed a perfect square. And this is how it's going to factor every time, okay? All right, so watch this, okay? This will turn into this. This guy right here will turn into this, okay? It will turn into this, okay? Just write that down. And we want to know what's going to go right here, okay? We have a blank right there. Okay, so let's figure out what goes in the blank, okay? Now, cut b in half and put it in the blank. Okay? So this is what you get. We have x, right? We have that squared. The blank goes right here, so cut b in half. Well, b is 10, so cut that in half, you get 5, right? Positive 10 cut in half is positive 5, so you're going to put a plus 5 right there in the blank. Okay? And now, don't forget, it still equals 39 plus 25 is 64. Okay? And now, square root both sides. So we get x plus 5 squared equals 64. I'm going to take the square root here. I'll take the square root here. And don't forget, when you take the square root of both sides, right, you have to put plus or minus. Don't forget that. Okay? Now, if I take the square root of something that's squared, remember the square root cancels out the square, right? So I'm left with this, x. Oh, I don't need the parentheses anymore. All right? This square root right here, that square root cancels out this square, so I'm left with x plus 5. And that equals plus or minus, now the square root of 64, that's right, it's 8. Okay? So here's all we have to do now. Solve for x by subtracting 5 to both sides. So minus 5 on both sides, and we get x equals, now remember there are two answers. There's a plus 8 and a minus 8. So we have to do it in two ways. We do the plus 8 minus 5, and x equals minus 8 minus 5. So x equals plus 8 minus 5 is 3. And negative 8 minus 5, what's that? There you go, negative 13. Okay, so there are my two answers, 3 and negative 13. All right, those are my two answers, just like that. Okay, let's do one more example and see what happens, okay? Here we go. I'll try to do two, but let's see. I don't want to push it. All right, so here we go. Example. We have x squared minus 12x plus 40 equals 5. All right, here we go. Move the 40 to the other side. X squared minus 12x, leave a blank right there, equals, I'm subtracting 40, right? So subtract 40, so I get negative 35. Okay, all right. Now, remember to fill in this blank, you take the b term, you cut it in half. So negative 12 cut in half is negative 6, and square negative 6. Negative 6 times negative 6 is positive 36. So put a plus 36. And if I add 36 here, I have to add 36 here. Okay? All right, and here we go. Now this is the trinomial that's going to factor into this. You put an x here and you put a squared there. Okay? And now look at the b term again. Cut the b term in half. That's negative 12, cut it in half. Negative 12 cut in half is negative 6, so put a negative 6 right here. Okay, equals negative 35 plus 36 is 1. Okay, now take the square root on both sides. Plus or minus, don't forget it. Okay, the square root of this, remember the square and the square root cancel, so you're left with x minus 6 equals plus or minus. The square root of 1 is just 1. So now add 6 to both sides, and we get x equals plus 1 plus 6, and x equals minus 1 plus 6. And so this plus 1 plus 6 is 7, and negative 1 plus 6 is 5, and so my two answers are 7 and 5. Okay? All right, we'll try one more. X squared plus 6x plus 2 equals 3. All right, you guys try this one on your own. All right, good job. Here we go. I'll move the 2 over. X squared plus 6x blank equals, I subtract 2 on both sides. 3 minus 2 is 1. Cut that in half. That's 3 squared. That's 9, so plus 9. Add 9 to both sides. This now becomes this with an x here, a square there. Cut that in half. You get plus 3, so plus 3 equals 1 plus 9 is 10. Okay, now take the square root on both sides, plus or minus. Square root cancels that. We're left with x plus 3 equals plus or minus square root 10. You cannot simplify the square root of 10, so it stays like that. Subtract the 3 from both sides, and we get x equals plus or minus radical 10 minus 3, but I want it written like this. X equals, I want the negative 3 first, then the plus or minus radical 10. That's the best way, okay? All right, hopefully that was helpful. I will see you guys soon.